And our next candidate is Mr. Tyler Buller. Good morning.
Good morning.
You can begin your remarks when you are ready.
Thank you. I'm here this morning because of tacos, which is, I know, a very cruel thing to say to people shortly before lunch. I know it's a hungry audience. But the truth is that tacos are where my work ethic comes from. They're what brought me to the Attorney General's office, and they're why I'm here applying for the Court of Appeals. I'm from a family of small business workers, restaurant employees that eventually worked their way up to being restaurant owners. My mom basically came from nothing. She went to Hoover High School here in town, and as a teenager, she started working making tacos at Taco Casa. It's a restaurant here in town. And she realized that she wanted to build something out of that, not just building tacos, but building a life for our family, for her and my dad, for me and my sister. She didn't have the kind of money you need to invest in a restaurant. She had sweat equity, she had hard work, and that's what she invested to start buying into that business and eventually into the sister restaurant up in Okoboji, a restaurant called the Taco House that maybe a few of you have been to. Tacos are my family. It's what I saw from my parents growing up. I saw an incredible work ethic, 60, 80 hours a week of what I consider just back-breaking work. Everything from cleaning the rugs at the end of the night to making tacos during the day, running the cash register, and everything in between. And because it was a family business, our whole family contributed to it. My mom's there from open to close just about every day. My dad was the jack of all trades. He was making tacos on the line, but he was also the mechanic. He was the janitor. He was the guy you called when something broke and nobody knew how to fix it. My sister and my grandma helped with the books, and I did everything I could along the way. One of my first memories, and this is first or second grade, is after school, I'm waiting for my mom to wrap up in the office, and I'm cleaning tables out front. In more recent years, I haven't been cleaning tables so much. I'm the secretary for the corporation now. I'm doing what I can to do the back end, the paperwork, and help keep the business moving forward. And the reason I talk about tacos is because that is the work ethic that was instilled in me. That's the work ethic of my family. And when I got to 7th grade mock trial, this big light bulb went off in my life and for my parents. And what we found is that I was on the path to do some kind of lawyering someday. We didn't have any lawyers in the family. I was the first to even consider going to college, but I knew some kind of lawyering was in my future. I wanted to help people. I wanted to get into the courtroom, so prosecution was a natural fit, and that's how I came to the Attorney General's office. I like to think that I bring the taco work ethic to my work as a lawyer and in the law. Over the last 10 years, I've done very difficult cases across the state, and I think what these cases show, what I hope you see in my application materials, is that this is a resume that I think stacks up against anybody else. This is tough, hard work that offers something different to the Court of Appeals to enhance the work. As a criminal trial prosecutor, these are tough, emotional cases. It's hard work, and it's deeply practical. What I mean is that these are cases that involve real people. The majority of my caseload is violent crime. It's cases where I'm prosecuting offenders for murder, homicide, kidnapping, sexual abuse in all corners of the state. What I see in these cases are real people, real Iowans that have real problems, and they've come to me and they've come to the justice system seeking relief, seeking justice, however it might look for them. So whether it's the murder case in Delaware County or the kidnapping case in Hardin County or the public corruption case in Emmett County, everywhere I go, what I see is real people that are looking for real solutions to their problems. And I have been a lot of places. Between criminal trials and appeals, I've been in 78 of Iowa's 99 counties. I've tried multiple Class A felonies, basically the range of violent crime, the worst of the worst that you get to see. And that's when I meet people, is on the worst days of their lives or shortly thereafter. They've lost a loved one or something truly horrific has happened to them. Good appellate judges remember that these are the kind of people at the heart of our cases. Behind the cold transcript, behind the record, are real Iowans with real problems. And I've spent my whole career trying to get justice for folks like that. I think my appellate experience is also different from what you typically see for an applicant from the Court of Appeals. as well as being different from most of the members of the Court of Appeals. So over the last 10 years, I've handled 400 appellate cases. And these aren't just copy-paste briefs that have a neat little issue you can turn around in an afternoon. These are big cases. They're complex felonies, they involve difficult statutory and constitutional questions, and most importantly, they involve real people with unique facts in every single one of these cases. I think my expertise in this area has been recognized both within my office and without. 5 different Bar Association presidents have appointed me as chairman of the Appellate Practice Committee, and the Chief Justice has appointed me to the Appellate Rules Task Force, where we're doing our very best to modernize the whole system and make the entire system work better for everyone. In these 400 cases, I have reviewed the record, I have conducted legal research, I have written on a deadline and prepared for oral argument. That, members of the commission, is the daily work of a Court of Appeals judge. And it's what I've done every day of my career as a prosecutor in the Attorney General's office. I really appreciate the one-on-one conversations I've had with several of you, some meaningful conversations and very candid conversations that matter to me. But I know not every commissioner was able to meet with every candidate, so I do want to turn over the remainder of my time for questions.
Thank you. We'll start our questioning with Commissioner Hoytink.
Thank you. I appreciate your application. Would you describe your civil experience? I think there's a reference to about 25% of your practice as being civil. Is any of it related to business disputes, or is it primarily related to civil pieces of criminal litigation?
No, the Attorney General's office by statute does not handle business disputes. About 70% of my practice experience is criminal and roughly 30% is civil. The civil cases that I tend to see are those that touch criminal law in some way. So that's post-conviction relief cases. It's sexually violent predator commitments, which are civil under Chapter 229A. And then I also served briefly as the Iowa Civil Rights Prosecutor, covering for a good friend and coworker while she was not available to do that work.
Thank you.
And Mr. Buller, I'm going to remind you just to stay a little closer to the mic so it is getting picked up on the live stream.
That's okay. On Friday, the Chief Justice had asked me to pull it down because I was not quite tall enough for the podium in Iowa City where I was on.
Commissioner Chase.
Thank you. Thank you for your application. Would you agree that it's important for the Court of Appeals to have diversity both in geographic areas of the state, also in practice experience, and what do you bring to that court if selected?
Absolutely. I think it's crucial. As a practitioner, what I worry about are the blind spots of any particular judge, and every judge has blind spots. The judges I worry about are those that don't realize they have blind spots. I can tell you that is something that I'm keenly aware of with what my background is. I do think I offer geographic diversity in my practice. I mentioned 78 of the 99 counties, and things really do look different in different courthouses across the state. In the last couple months, I've been in the Polk County Courthouse and the Calhoun County Courthouse, which are worlds apart in about every way you can imagine. In a district court where you get a judge once a week or once every 10 days, justice really looks different out there in the community. EDMS and e-filing has made this a little bit better. It's easier to find a judge by email than looking up and down the hallway and hoping you find somebody. But still, access to justice is wildly different depending on where you go. Experience with those different courthouses, I think, is important. And I have practiced in every judicial district in the state. We have a unified court system that, at least on paper, has a unified set of rules, but the practice is that they are not so unified. The practices at some of the big courthouses in Waterloo, Des Moines, and Davenport are wildly different from what you find in other places. And a good Court of Appeals judge knows that when they're reviewing a record. You could get the same transcript from Polk County that you might get from a rural county, and what happened leading up to the transcript is wildly different. This is kind of a pejorative term, but it is the one used at the Polk County Courthouse. Initial appearance can be a cattle call in a county like Polk County. But there are plenty of places in the state where the magistrate isn't even doing initial appearances every day because there isn't an indictable offender in custody. What leads us to the transcripts the Court of Appeals gets is wildly different, and you need to understand that to do the job.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pearson.
Thank you. Thank you for your application. In addition to your current work with the Justice Department, tell us about your work with Simpson College and what led you to become involved in that area?
I teach at Simpson College. I have a course I teach every semester that touches a little bit of everything in the legal system, and I also coach the mock trial team there. I mentioned 7th grade mock trial in my opening remarks because that changed my life. It really did. I came from a family where we didn't know what mock trial was, and that's not an insult to anyone in my family. That's the world we came from. If you'd asked my parents that I was going to do middle school, high school, college, and law school mock trial, they would have asked what a mock trial was. My dad in particular, I remember, thought it was funny to come to this because it's like a sporting event, but everybody's in a suit and tie, right? It has the same competitive edge. You can't cheer from the audience, which I did have to make sure I explained. But I found it so rewarding and so life-changing that I want to make sure that is something I am involved with in my law practice, because there are a lot of students I get at Simpson College who come from a similar background to me. There are a lot of students that don't have lawyers in the family. They might not know what mock trial is or what career opportunities are open to them. These are the students that I go out of my way to mentor and get to know and make sure they see that there are opportunities. Now, not every student I have is on the law track, and that's the other part that I find really rewarding, is this diversity of students that come into my class. I have everyone from the girl who wants to talk about her poetry and the theater that she's working on, to the opera student, to a reserve officer doing his criminal justice degree, to the chemistry student. And I have to explain legal concepts to all of them. I have to teach the rules of hearsay to all of these different individuals with different backgrounds, and it's meaningful. It also teaches me something. Every semester I have walked away learning more about the law, how I am as a teacher, and how I can communicate more effectively. I think the law should be accessible to everyone at a level that every student in my Simpson class can understand it. I try to think about that in my practice when I'm talking to juries, and I think about how good judges are able to make the law accessible. And that's something I would take from that Simpson experience if I were appointed to the bench.
Thank you.
Commissioner Picklett?
Yeah, thank you. You just spoke just in your last remarks about the need to communicate effectively, and you've spent some time talking about your professional experience, but I think the need to have strong writing abilities is necessary for the position in which we're trying to fill today. Could you maybe speak to one of your writing samples or take a few minutes and talk about your writing style and how you meet this high standard?
Sure. One of the interesting things about the Court of Appeals is the workload. It's the elephant in the room when you're talking about the position. And I think many lawyers don't quite understand how difficult that workload is because they don't see it in their practice. Your average Iowa lawyer maybe does 1 or 2 appeals a year, and that'd be on the high end. On the other hand, at the Attorney General's office, we have a division that is devoted solely to criminal appellate briefing, and that's where I share my time between that and my trial work. The closest analog to the Court of Appeals workload in the entire state is the Criminal Appeals Division of the Attorney General's office. Our attorneys turn out about 600 briefs a year, which is more than any other entity in the state. And I mention that not to say that the numbers are what matter, but it is writing on a deadline, and there is an element of triage. I think if you asked any Court of Appeals judge, they would tell you there are plenty of cases that you wish you had another week or another couple of weeks to turn that opinion around, to review that record in detail. I have the same problem in my work at the Attorney General's office. There are cases I could spend 3 months on if I wanted to. One that I argued last Friday is this cutting-edge issue with familial DNA and acquiring it without a search warrant. I could have spent my whole summer doing legal research on that issue, but the reality is I had to get that case off of my desk, I had to start preparing for trial, and I needed to move on to the next brief, and that's exactly what the Court of Appeals has to do, is triage that work. If you're asking for a description of what my work is like, I think it's concise, and I think it is written in a way that you don't have to be a lawyer to understand it, which I think is crucially important. I come from a little bit of a journalism background in high school and college, and I like to think that I still write more like a reporter than I do like a lawyer, and lawyers in the room, please do not be offended. But nobody wants to read a bunch of lawyerly writing. I think it's bad for the system because the litigants don't understand, and it's bad for practitioners. 120 pages of an opinion is not useful to me as a practitioner when I'm trying to understand the work of the appellate courts. So concision, understandability, and a practical element.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gray?
Thank you. Mr. Burrell, I am from Calhoun County, and I can certainly agree with you that the way the law is practiced in Calhoun is a lot different than Polk County. You and I have not met, but I have seen and heard today a remarkable number of personal achievements. But the question I have for you is, sir, why not the district court rather than the Court of Appeals?
And I've thought very carefully about that question. First, I think that my skill set does offer the most benefit to the Court of Appeals. The lack of practical experience in some Court of Appeals judges, I think, is a hindrance. It is something that I think all appellate judges could benefit from. I'm a big believer that you become a better trial lawyer by being an appellate lawyer. You become a better appellate lawyer by being a trial lawyer. And there really is nothing more humbling than reading your own transcript when you're an attorney, because what you see is the question you thought was very clear is not so clear. What you thought made it into the record may have happened in chambers and you forgot to get it reduced to writing later. This is crucially important, and you hear laughter because we have all been in those shoes. I think the Court of Appeals really would benefit from a pragmatic, practical practitioner, and that's what I have to offer. I will also tell you I have a lot of very good friends who come from my office, county attorneys' offices, public defenders' offices, collaborative places that go to the district court and feel very lonely. One of my good friends describes it as being king of the castle, but there is nobody in it but you. And that's something that I think about because I like the collaborative element of my work. I don't like making decisions entirely alone. As a prosecutor, I'm where the buck stops with cases, right? I get to make the final decision. But along the way, I collaborate with victims and survivors, with police officers, with my co-counsel. That is deeply rewarding to me, and I think that will be rewarding about work on the Court of Appeals, because 3 judges are better than 1 when it comes to complicated legal disputes, and I enjoy that kind of collaboration.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hanson?
No question.
Commissioner Bevel?
No question.
Commissioner Hoyk?
No question.
Commissioner Henderson?
No questions.
Commissioner Stanger?
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
One of the concerns I have as a trial lawyer is that my appellate judges forget that the names on the papers and the briefs in front of them are people. You and I met in a rural courthouse in Tipton, Iowa, in the hallway on one of my soldiers' worst days of her life. And I know from our experience that you won't forget that at the Court of Appeals, and you mentioned that. You've stated in your application that you're applying because you love the state and the court system and the law. Can you expand on that desire and that love?
I can. It's one of those cheesy things that lawyers say, I love the law, right? What I mean by that is I love what the law can do for people. I love that the law can start the healing journey for a victim or survivor. It's not going to get them all the way of where they need to go because, like you suggest, Commissioner, I meet people on the absolute worst days of their lives when they've only begun that journey to get where they need to go. But the law helps them get there. I've been told by many families that getting that verdict, especially in a homicide case where they've lost someone very close to them, is the last piece they need to start their journey moving forward because the pieces are broken and on the floor in many of these families. The only way we can start to put them back together is do our best to get them justice. And that's going to look different in every case. It might not be a conviction. I've had plenty of cases where a resolution along the way is the right choice. I've had cases where dismissal is the right choice, and I feel good about those too. But getting people into court, having someone recognize what they've been through, that the law can do something for them and start that healing journey, I do love that. I love that about my work. I think it's probably clear from my materials. I love the work I do because I get to help people start that journey, and I get to feel good at the end of the day about what the court system has done, because at the end of the day, I think prosecutors and judges are largely in the same business. It's justice and it's accountability, and that's what I love about the law.
Thanks, Tyler.
We have time for one more question. Commissioner Graber?
I will defer on to the next.
Commissioner O'Brien?
Thank you. It looks like you have written quite a bit about rape cases, and I'm assuming that this is based on trial experience. Could you comment and give us a little insight on that?
I can. One thing I discovered when preparing to go through this process is that if you Google my name, you get a list of very sad cases. Many of those are rape and sex assault cases, which unfortunately has become my sad specialty at the Attorney General's office. Most prosecutors do not want to do cases with child victims or adult victims who've been through sexual abuse. And that's because they're hard. These are cases that you don't leave at the office. They follow you home. weeks or months later, you're driving to the next trial, and that's the victim you're thinking about that pops into your head. They haunt you sometimes. And I can tell you that I enjoy the work, but I hate that I have to do it. I meet with a lot of kids who have been through just truly horrific circumstances. They often come from homes that can't give them the support they need. The social services aren't available. Sometimes in a rural area, a therapist might be 90 minutes away. Mom and dad don't have a car, and there's no way to get these kids the help they need. So when I meet them, they're coming from the worst of circumstances, and they're looking for someone to tell them what's going to happen. So what I've tried to do is take my experience working with these kids and working with adult victims too, and train other prosecutors. You see a lot of that in my trainings as well. I work closely with sexual assault nurse examiners who are really the front line with children and adults who've experienced sexual abuse. That's who kids see first. And I want to make sure we have a through line from that nurse's work to what I do in the courtroom to get folks onto that healing journey. I find these cases horrific to work on, but deeply rewarding because of what I can do to help these children move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Buller. We appreciate your application and look forward to deliberating it later this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.